and 10 scrapped features. It turns out Fnaf had a whole load of features planned that were never actually implemented fully or that were changed last minute. I talked about how Freddy was only meant to jump scare you after you lost power in another video, and I talked about a few others in different Fnaf lists. If you guys want a whole list on scrapped Fnaf features, let me know in the comments. Is it something that people would actually want because it's something that I want to do? Or is it more so something that I do just to talk about things and change things up, because we're kind of running out of Fnaf lists. If you have any ideas, let me know. When I look at these features that I want to keep hidden for the purposes of another list, if you want it at least, I can only imagine how different the game would be if they had added these things like alarms for every hour, or animatronics coming down other hallways. It would have changed the game and potentially made it worse for wear. And Nights At Freddy in the bathroom. Freddy is in an odd situation when you look at things from an outsider's perspective. Sure, we know he likes to hide from the camera, and technically these robots have no sense of biological sex, but like, come on, Freddy. You should know not to hide in the girl's bathroom no matter what, unless you want to get cancelled. However, that's not the scary part. Even though AI sentient enough to have that kind of crisis coming was pretty damn terrifying. The scary part is that what if we've been wrong this whole time? What if Chica isn't the only girl in the series? If Freddy is also a female, this could flip everything on its head. If we can't even understand who Freddy is meant to be, can we really trust anything we know about the series? We thought Scott threw a curveball when he added himself canonically into the games, but what would happen if Freddy was female? Oh boy, I'm having an existential crisis now. Number 8, Afton's Flesh. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, we are introduced to the character known as Springtrap, the golden Springlock bodysuit with William Afton barely clinging to life inside. He has been poked and prodded more than people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, and while he is still alive, it appears as if he's just been rotting away, or hell, even just gotten his skin torn off when the Springlock's activated, resulting in getting spiked in multiple places, but still somehow surviving. In some of the scenes/menus we can get in Five Nights 3, we can actually see that this is the case, as we get a close look at Springtrap with his mouth open, revealing the hardly living body of William Afton inside. His skin has been peeled off from the looks of it, or it is at least extremely raw, but no mistake, that is old Willie Afton sitting in that suit. This can be seen regularly and there's no need to really do anything specific to see it, but it does require a keen eye, and I can tell you I never noticed it. I can't even see the ketchup when it's right in front of me, let alone something hidden underneath a golden spring bodysuit. And it's 7, golden background. Fnaf 3 introduced the mechanic of needing to make repairs. Maybe the ventilation got shut down, or the audio was corrupted, or maybe the camera stopped working. And if any of this happens, the player needs to reboot that system. While you do this, the cameras you see are just static. However, sometimes the static can sometimes show the face of Golden Freddy. Like, dude, I know times are tough having to deal with like 15 missing children at this point, but there's no need to turn into a cam girl. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Oh crap. I'm not getting out of the semi. No matter what, it is indeed possible to see the face of Golden Freddy in the static. It's not clear, it does take some keen observation, but it's quite subtle. But once you see it, you will never be the same. Mostly because you'll have seen it, and that means that you will have changed, because before, you hadn't seen it. Logic. And at 6, the Hidden Skull. Man, Fnaf 3 has a lot going for it, doesn't it? The Fnaf 3 minigames are honestly the main game of Fnaf 3. You gotta play them to get the right combo of numbers to dial into a brick wall, then you gotta click the toy Bonnie on your desk to get the glitch minigames, and then you need to put 5 kids to rest in order to get the good canon ending to the game. However, if you really pay attention during the free roam minigames, if you head to the supply closet, somewhere I don't believe that Shadow Freddy brings you, you can see the same supply room from the first game. However, going off script doesn't help you just to see a nostalgic location. Actually, it can reveal something even more sinister in the form of a child's skull on the shelf in the background. Yeah, in a series all about missing children, we get one of their skulls right behind us as we head up to be dismantled by the purple guy. I mean, I guess we're the dead child in this scenario, because we've already possessed the animatronic. So does that mean that it's our skull, and that's why we don't pay attention to it? Or is it because we were killed, so we know it would be there? Halfway through at number 5, nicknames. The news clippings at the end of the Fnaf games always focus on one article. The place getting shut down, the place reopening, the place burning down, and in the first 2 Fnaf games, the stories on the outside weren't actual articles. It was just some random text meant to fill up the space. It's commonly referred to as lorem ipsum, at least it was when I was in school. However, in Fnaf 3, Scott decided to include some of the story of him creating the games for the fans with the more powerful glasses in the world. One article talks about how his last attempt at becoming a game designer was a toss-up between a remake of his first game, a sequel to another one of his games called Desolate Hope, and an entirely new game about animatronics and pizza. He went with the latter obviously, and that was probably the best decision he ever made. However, later on he also reveals that the iconic names of Bonnie, Chica, Freddy, and Foxy were just nicknames he had in development. He would call them that before actually coming up with their real names. However, after calling them that for so long, he grew attached to the names and ended up keeping them. Probably another good decision if I'm being honest. Can you imagine what it would be like if Bonnie was named like Albert or something? Actually, that would be scarier. And at 4, paper plates. Let's take a break from Fnaf 3. In Fnaf 2, on one of the cams, you can see 3 paper plate crafts that resemble the 3 main animatronics. Sometimes though, they can take on a mind of their own. At least the Bonnie one does. It can sometimes not appear on the camera view and then just later appear in your office. How did it get there? Who placed it there? Was it an animatronic? If it was, why didn't they attack us? Was it a phantom animatronic? Can they even do that? Is this plate animatronic possessed? Was a kid stuffed into the paper plate bag? Like, I know this is a horror game, but like, come on! Nobody else is working there at the time, and so how the hell did this thing move? Oh, and also it could have happened in Fnaf 3 too. It was a short one, but it was a break nonetheless. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, family portrait. Family is everything to a lot of people, and while Scott was stuck in a job he didn't prefer and kept failing at making it in the career he really wanted, I can't speak for him personally, but I'm sure his family was helping him get through it. His wife and kids I'm sure are one of, if not the reason he woke up in the morning, so in honor of them and to get some more assets for the game, he used their images wherever he could. Particularly in Fnaf 4's hallway, all the pictures on the wall are Scott and his family, and in Ultimate Custom Night, the face of the one you should not have killed is a picture of his son with the contrast cranked to the max. Family is so important, and Scott both honored them and immortalized them in his games by incorporating their family pictures into them, which is so sweet and honestly touching. Something that you don't expect to get from a FNAF game. Man, if only he treated matpat like that. And ultimately, at number 2, living proof. Let's take another break from FNAF 3. Okay, that's enough. In Fnaf 3's minigames, we see the story of how Springtrap came to be. We see Afton dismantle the animatronics and then unintentionally release the spirits of the dead children, who then come to spook him or get an apology. I don't know what the ghosts of 5 dead kids are gonna do aside from keep you in hell for all eternity until you escape by mind melding with VR video game testers. Anyway, as we see from the game, Afton gets scared by the spirits and then runs into his spring bodysuit to feel more powerful, probably hoping it would scare them because it was this character that killed them in the first place. However, thanks to the water dripping in from the outside, coupled with Afton's haste, he ends up getting snapped by Springlocks and collapses. I've seen many comments over the months we've been talking about FNAF where people say that this is where Afton died. This honestly has never sat well with me. I always believed he was alive in the suit, and now I know why. In this scene, we never see him stop moving. Sure, he could have died and possessed Springtrap like some have suggested, but if that was the case, he would have stopped moving. He also wouldn't have eyes that are full of life like he does in the Springtrap suit, since, as I said before, we can see his flesh inside and those eyes are clearly his. Afton doesn't die in this moment, hence why I don't consider Springtrap an animatronic, because Afton is still alive and consciously controlling him. Afton himself is living proof that Afton never dies. matpat even said it himself in his theory on that game. He said, "Notice he never stops moving." That's because he isn't dead. He only dies in Pizzeria Simulator after being lured back by Henry and being set ablaze, damning him to hell. Finally, in number 1, Butterfingers. On the main stage in FNAF 1, we see 3 animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. When we leave the camera or it decides to cut out for a moment, we can see Bonnie leave, and then Chica, and then Freddy doesn't leave until like night 4 or something, right? Well, as the animatronics leave the main stage, they drop their iconic item. Bonnie loses his guitar, Freddy loses his microphone, and Chica loses her cupcake. Why? Where did they go? Do they just leave them on the stage? Did it make it more intimidating? I need answers, Scott. Senpai noticed me. Both Scott and matpat. And at 10-second times the charm. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the spring bodysuit like we see happen in FNAF 3? In a way it's possible, and it appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described as having scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired in the first place, since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location? So is that unfortunate incident actually William? There are plenty of other people that it could be as well, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But with William continuing to use the suits afterwards and putting it on like we hear in FNAF 3, and then again he ends up failing in FNAF 3 as well, it's unlikely. So No. And at 9, Golden Fredbear. One theory that I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure mostly started around Fnaf 4, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp and lifeless in the original Fnaf and Fnaf 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations because it can't physically move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child would be the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true based on characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night, although I guess that might not mean much, and just like coloring and size. Since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have to be, since Fredbear would have to accommodate a human plus the robot parts, and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since, you know, Golden Freddy would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter much apparently, since Springtrap went to Scraptrap and then went to Burntrap. But from the evidence, it seems like Golden Freddy is merely an illusion or a hallucination created in the mind of Michael Afton. See our Golden Freddy was never real video for more info on that, because that proves this idea wrong. And you're all gonna be mad at me, but you know what? That video deserves more love, or at least interaction. And at 8, Elizabeth Afton. I've seen a few people asking if or assuming that Elizabeth Afton was a victim of a Springlock failure, and the truth is, she wasn't. The Circus Baby animatronic isn't a Springlock suit, since a Springlock suit in this case is defined as a suit that contains robotic parts, but uses a special mechanism that when cranked moves those robotic parts to the side so that a person can climb inside and wear the robot like a suit. The Baby animatronic isn't one of those, because there's no way to actually wear this animatronic. Baby it's just a robot, so there is no way that she could have Springlocked Elizabeth. Elizabeth is just a normal victim of her father's killing spree, which resulted in her somehow wanting to make him proud, despite him being the reason she's dead. Directly. Like, not even an, he just because he made the animatronic thing. No. Nobody else had a hand in her death aside from him. But she still wants to make him proud. I don't know. I guess Baby crushed her body and then her sanity too. Which, I mean, I'd understand. That's pretty rough. And at 7, Kelsey. The New Kid from 1:35 AM is a story from 3rd Fazbear Frights book. The story revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts. They aren't really popular, you know, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they try to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time Devin grows jealous of Kelsey, because, you know, he's adored and loved by everyone in the school. So, in an act of revenge, or to maybe try to gain control over him, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. I guess to try to humble him, I guess? I don't know why you thought that this would be a good thing, but obviously the plan goes horribly wrong because it's a FNAF book. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks ended up failing, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, causing all of the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth because he doesn't think about fingerprints, and snap. The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out. But not before seeing a body in the suit, with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. I don't know, okay? Could this be a character that we have yet to see in the games? Probably not. It's just a character in the book, alright? This doesn't happen in the games, okay? It's a myth. This is just a book thing, okay? Stop. And at 6, unintentional. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions by William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that is not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in Fnaf AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made. And considering the abilities of Baby, at the very least, we know that these were made in order to kill. We know that was a thought in his brain, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to think that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. More on one of them in a minute, but honestly, if William made the Funtimes with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks. And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal bars, cogs, gears, and more into the same place your body would take up, was made with pure intentions, then you need therapy more than I do, okay? I have some numbers you can call. Especially when a normal animatronic and then a suit for your employees would be cheaper and less likely the focus of a lawsuit. Speaking of which, halfway through into number 5, liability. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that Fnaf's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way with enough room for a human to fit inside is insane, and while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers an hour in huge giant metal death boxes, so maybe we can't really complain. While yes, they do have their faults, there's nothing compared to the ability to be both an animatronic and human suit. It's an incredible feat of technology, even if just absolutely the dumbest idea ever. Because it's terrifying for the same reasons that it would be in game. Someone can dress in it and pretend to be a robot, okay? It can clamp down on you in any second, and it has done so multiple times before. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they did not need to end up creating, but like, I don't know, like these things are so hella deadly. Why would both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them? Especially Henry, like goddamn. Just make a separate suit for the animatronic, okay? Like make a separate suit that your employee can wear. It's the employees, the people who run your business. They make you money, so you know they don't end up dying from robotic bits replacing their normal human organic bits in a hot suit that fails when it gets moist. Sweat, breathing. Yeah, I would never get in one of those things. Even if there hadn't been an incident before, okay, that just seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen. And I don't want to be the one whose family sues because I'm too dead to do it myself, alright? So, no. It's a myth that they shouldn't have gotten sued. In at 4, crying child. Okay, now this one's certainly gonna make people mad, but there's no way that I could do this list without mentioning the greatest debate of literally anyone yelling at me ever. The amount of people who have messaged me on Instagram or on TikTok yelling at me in my TikTok comments or in the YouTube comments telling me that the bite of 83 is somehow a Springlock incident bothers me to my core. I say this every time I bring it up. It's not a Springlock failure, okay? The fact that a load of people consider this to be a Springlock failure is the myth that I'm addressing. The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, okay? There's no Springlocks that could have a chance of failing, since, a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanisms failing to hold the robotic bits away, meaning that it snaps back into animatronic mode when a person's inside. That's why it's bad if there's a person inside, and there would be no Springlock mechanisms inside the mouth either, because that would always be in animatronic mode. Like your head, your eyes would line up with the opening of the mouth so that you could see. So yeah, that's kind of. Plus, I don't think anyone who is 7 feet tall working at Freddy Fazbear's. No, they're in the NBA. The jaw also just moves up and down, okay? Truthfully, I don't know how much of the community believes this to be a Springlock incident, because the comments are always going to be filled with more people that are against it than for it, because if you're for it, you don't really feel the need to comment about it. But it's still concerning the amount of comments I'm seeing and the amount of DMs I get on Instagram, okay? Which, by the way, follow me on if you don't hate me, because I need to get past 20. I get to 19 and it goes back down to get past the 120, Getting close to the end of number 3, not beefed up. The fact that these animatronics are incredibly powerful is absolutely an insane thing that nobody really seems to grasp. Like the fact that Fredbear was able to crush a child's skull, something that we've covered how crazy is. Imagine if that was an employee, okay? Like ignoring the fact that you think it's a Springlock incident or that it's a Springlock suit, the amount of power that jaw has is a hazard for everyone who comes into contact with it. Like goddamn. And before you say anything, okay, it wasn't a Springlock failure. I don't know how many times I need to go over that. There's no Springlocks in the mouth, and they weren't active at the time, okay? It can't be a Springlock failure. So these animatronics are just insanely powerful animatronics, alright? Which would be explained by them being intended to kill, which also explains why it would have the power to crush crying child's skull. The way I see it, William probably wanted to use the Fredbear suit as his kill suit because, Freddy's the more popular character, but then he had to change to Bonnie after, his son was killed in the suit, especially considering how he saw Elizabeth end up possessing Baby, so he was probably worried that Crying Child did the same with Fredbear, so yeah, that's the way I see it. But ultimately, in at number 2, Springlocks are real. Okay, you see, if I was to actually do like a cosplay of the purple guy and actually do it without it being a joke, I'd probably end up using a purple phone case, because, I gotta reference the phone guy. But I don't need a Springlock crank, because those aren't actually a thing in real life. While the term Springlock is used in real life, it is a totally different mechanism from the actual Fnaf thing, okay? I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from the Springlocks and You How Not to Die Remastered thread on the Fnaf wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs. From my research, what I gathered was that a spring lock in real life is in the simplest of terms if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks just simply brings you back to that page or quotes that page, so there's really only one source. Spring locks, as they're used in the games, do not exist in real life. Alright, that is a myth. The term is used, but it's two separate words instead of one, and they mean totally different things. So please stop. And finally, in at number 1, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only being revealed in the survival logbook of all things, and then confirmed in the Fnaf movie scripts that Scott ended up tossing after he talked about them on Reddit. And honestly, we don't really know much about her. We don't know how she died, but there are plenty of theories that claim to have evidence of her being a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way, I don't know. Maybe she ends up possessing Golden Freddy after all, I don't know, okay? We figured that he could be a Springlock suit and then that he had like the guts removed or something like that, hence the slumped over nature as I talked about earlier, but if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, wouldn't they have found it when they were gutting it? Because like, that seems like something you'd notice. I don't know, but maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. But for a suit technician, he also did, you know, get into the animatronic when it was wet, something that he was definitely smart enough to avoid. But yeah, Cassidy being a Springlock victim has very little evidence, if you can even call it evidence though, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna deem this one a myth. Light your torches, get your pitchforks, come at me in the comments section for saying that, because I know you're going to. I can't avoid it every time, but you're not going to change the outcome of this video, alright? It's already uploaded, you can't change it, it's too late.
Number 10, Bite of 87. Well, we don't really know for sure if this is correct, as the Bite of 87 is still not fully confirmed in terms of all the details. It is possible that it was the result of a Springlock failure. It's believed that the Bite of 87 led to the fatal injury of a guest when the frontal lobe of their brain was badly damaged in an incident related to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Now, based on the Bite of 83, we can imagine it may have been a similar incident where someone basically stuck their head inside an animatronic and kinda had it chomped. Or it could have been something else that happened. But either way, if it was similar to the Bite of 83, or even if it wasn't, it seems likely that a Springlock failure could be possible, as the suits may have still been in use at that time, as the suits may still have been in use at the time that this terrible incident occurred. Now, some might say they stopped being used after the Bite of 83, but with a timeline this wonky, I don't think we have anything that is 100% concrete, conclusive yet in regards to when Springlock suits stopped being used across the board forever. Also, I feel like there are times maybe where they were like, let's stop using them for like a bit, and then we think we fixed them, and then they're still, you know, dysfunctional. Because that's just how Springlock suits are. I would never even go near one of those things. Death trap. Number 9, William Afton and the leak. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to Springlock failures is William Afton. William Afton from the games, that is. In this version of the story, William Afton basically got destroyed by these Springlocks. He was fully impaled by the Springlocks in the Springlock Bonnie suit after trying to escape the ghosts of his victims. He thought hiding inside the Spring Bonnie suit would protect him, but hey, he was wrong. It turned out that there was water on the floor, which when he touched caused the Springlocks in the suit to loosen, or, you know, water that possibly dripped down from him, and also his breath. This caused the Springlocks to malfunction, they fully released and impaled William, ultimately causing his death. However, this is William Afton, so even dying would not keep him dead forever. It'd only keep him dead for a little while. We later learned that one of the vengeful spirits, or possibly a pair of them, cursed William to experience the pain that they had felt, thereby extending his life indefinitely, no matter the pain he suffered. Which is how William Afton can be a shambling corpse, but also somehow still alive. And friends, before I move on to this next spot on the list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, and if you love Fnaf too, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Can you springlock a ghost? To answer this question, we could turn to the Fazbear Frights book 135 AM, and one of the stories within its pages, titled The New Kid. In this story, a young boy named Devin befriends the new kid at school, Kelsey. However, while his other friend Mick seems to really like Kelsey, and at first, Devin does too, eventually Devin becomes jealous of Kelsey. When Kelsey seemingly ditches them one day when they're all hanging out, Devin decides to get revenge on him for doing this. Finding a new hangout spot, a now abandoned former Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, Devin dares Kelsey to put on a springlock suit. Kelsey does this and begins dancing around, but doing so, of course, triggers the spring locks within the suit to release, seemingly impaling him. While initially Devin and Mick leave Kelsey there for dead, Devin eventually returns to investigate, with Mick wondering if Kelsey might still be alive. When Devin does return, he doesn't see Kelsey in the suit, but later spots a black-haired ghostly figure within. It is implied that Kelsey is some kind of spirit of vengeance, possibly one of the spirits from the game lore that possessed Golden Freddy. And if you're wondering how we know that, well, later in the book we see that Kelsey is alive and well, seemingly, after he seemed to have been springlocked, so either he has superpowers or he a ghost. Number 7. The Amazing Escape. William Afton in the books is much more lucky, or perhaps just more brilliant, than his video game counterpart, at least when it comes to dodging spring locks somehow. Like in the games, he ends up getting spring locked, but instead of being killed by this experience, he miraculously survives, seeming to somehow pull a Harry Houdini and just escape that. While Charlie activates the spring locks in the suit he's wearing at the end of the novel Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes, we learn in the next book, The Twisted Ones, that the blood found in the scene ends up being analyzed in a lab and found to be fake blood. Finally, in the fourth closet, it is confirmed that William Afton, while harmed, miraculously survived being spring locked. I don't know how this is possible, but it's a thing that happened. Pretty impressive considering in most other cases, it's pretty much a death sentence. Number 6. Triggered by wriggling off mini arenas. This is probably my favorite consequence when it comes to the spring locks malfunctioning. Likely because you yourself actually get to experience failure in a way. But obviously not in real life, because that would be awful and horrible and extremely painful. Instead, you experience it in game. So although you can't feel it, you can't imagine what it would feel like, which honestly is also terrifying to do. This time when the spring locks fail, it is as a result of your movement. You are the one who must wriggle to shake off the mini arenas, which are climbing up the suit and attempting to kinda climb into it with you. If this happens enough times, the mini arena's jump scare will get triggered, implying your death by mini arenas. However, if you also wriggle too much to keep them off you, without winding the spring locks back up enough, you will trigger the spring locks release, which will also result in your death by being impaled by suit parts, which are released by those spring locks. Yikes. Number 5. The Fate of Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is thought by some, in regards to lore, to have been a possible springlock victim. The consequences of this employee's springlock failure would be, of course, that they died. That's right, people believe that Shadow Freddy, who appears to be somewhat ghostly in nature, is actually the spirit of a former Freddy's employee, who died while wearing a springlock Freddy suit. It's believed that for one reason or another, the suit malfunctioned, murdering its wearer. As a result, Shadow Freddy was born to haunt its former workplace, and was also likely one of the reasons that springlock suits stopped being used, at least temporarily. Although apparently not soon enough, as there were other failures that occurred possibly even after this one. Number 4. The Fate of RWQFSFASXC. Some believe that not only is Shadow Freddy a victim of the spring locks failing, but so is the shadowy figure of RWQFSFASXC. They believe that this shadowy Bonnie was another employee who, instead of being killed by the springlock Freddy suit, met their end while inside the springlock Bonnie suit, which also failed. My question is, if these employees happen to both die as a result of wearing and using the springlock suits and the suits malfunctioning, did they die on the same day? Because if not, why would you ever continue to use these suits as a company? And why would you ever, as an employee, agree to get in another one? Unless one of them was hired after the other one and like no one told them about what happened to the last person to put on one of those suits? Still, legal liability right there. Like, my alarms are going off for like lawsuits. Of course, this was only a theory anyways, and actually one that Scott claimed was incorrect in regards to the true origins of both Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC. Number 3. Payback. Going back to the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the 1:35 a.m. book, Kelsey, wasn't the only one to get springlocked in the story. When Devin returns to the abandoned Freddy's to see if Kelsey might still be alive, he notices the suit is empty. He thinks he sees something further inside, and so he decides to reach into the mouth of the suit, only for the suit to seemingly clamp down on his arm. Of course, you should never do that. If you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I'll put my arm in this thing where my arm could get stuck, don't do it. The more he struggles, the more he seems to get sucked into the suit. Sure, this isn't so much a springlock failure from the inside, and no one's wearing the suit in some of these. It's more reminiscent of the Bite of 83, because I don't think there was anyone in that suit. But this is still a springlock suit failing. So, while different, I still consider it to be a failure with consequences. Consequences being, Devin also likely died. Number 2. The Bite of 83. Definitely among the most memorable springlock failures is the Bite of 83. Now some of you are gonna say, Amanda, this is not a springlock failure. There was no one in that suit that we know of, which sure. But still, it's a springlock suit and it failed, so I'm counting it. Anyways, I feel like the Bite of 83 hasn't been fully confirmed really at all, but many theorize it to be true. Many theorize that our theory is true, that we have so far, because this is all we got, alright? We grab all these little Easter eggs and then we do our best to try to figure out what's going on in the narrative. Now, why do we believe that this could even be a springlock failure? Well, one, the crying child was crying when he was held up to give Fredbear a kiss, which many theorize is the reason the jaws of the animatronic bear clamped down, as a result of the tears making the gears wet and causing a springlock malfunction. Two, we have been led to believe that Fredbear was a springlock suit, so that's also why people suspect that the Bite of 83 could also be a springlock malfunction. Number 1. Multiple. While Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC may have been debunked as springlock failure victims by Scott himself, this theory didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, many thought that they were among those generally referred to in Fnaf 3 during Phone Guy's recording for night number 4. Here, Phone Guy mentions that the springlock suits are being discontinued as a result of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous springlock failures. Which, I gotta say, it makes sense to me too, because I'm like, what were all these multiple springlock failures? What does that entail, and how many were there? Oh boy.
And at 10, moisture sensitive. One of the things that I find to be the absolute dumbest thing about not only these damned suits but also the Fnaf series in general is how stupid it is that the springlock mechanisms inside the springlock suits fail with moisture. Sure, it explains why William gets springlocked because the room was dripping and whatever, the ceiling was leaking, and it makes everyone confused with Crying Child because he was crying. Despite that not being a springlock failure, everyone thought it was because he was crying and, moisture. But in actual practice, that is a horribly flawed mechanic. Like, if me breathing and sweating is going to make the metal bits snap on me, why would I do it in a hot robotic suit? That seems like a horrible and stupid idea. Like, yes, okay, put me in a hot and sweaty environment that gets me killed if it gets wet. Well, that's not a liability at all. I get sweaty wearing my freaking Doctor Strange costume, okay? Imagine a giant suit full of metal, okay? That would also be heavy as hell to walk around in too, only making the sweating worse. In at 9, designer. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these springlock suits were made with pure intentions. By William Afton. This kinda goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that's not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in Fnaf AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby and her comrades, we know that they were made in order to kill, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to assume that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. But honestly, if William made the Funtimes with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks, you get me? And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal, bars, cogs, gears, and chains and more into the same space as your body would be made with pure intentions, you should stop watching these videos and go to a therapist. Seriously, I have a number. And it ain't no bonus. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that Fnaf's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside is nuts. And while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers or miles, whatever, per hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't necessarily complain about it. And while yes, they have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit. That's an incredible feat of technology, and I'm sure they play into it with the marketing. Like, I mean, we hear the Foam Guy tapes from Fnaf 3 talking about these things, okay? And he never mentions a bonus or anything like that for you risking your life with one of these damn suits. And even if you end up getting Springlocked, there doesn't really seem to be any compensation package for your loved ones. Hell, if you die, you may not even get your severance. Actually, maybe that's why they do it. Your family can file a lawsuit since, you know, you died on the job, but that's a lengthy court battle against a massive company with a serial killer who has yet to be caught at the front lines. It's not really gonna do much good for your fam. So the fact that you don't get a bonus if you get in one of these suits, let alone get spring-locked, no thanks. It's a red flag. Swipe left. And it's 7 required. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they didn't really need to create. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, okay? Just make a separate suit for the animatronic characters, for the employees, okay? Like, the people who run your business. You know, they are the ones who make you the money, so, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs. OSHA would have been all over these goddamn suits if it was real in this universe, but apparently I guess it's not. And honestly, it's probably required by your contract to wear these suits at work. And if you refuse, you're probably gonna get fired, especially considering how they started getting ready to fire Jeremy because he saw Glitchtrap in Help Wanted. So why wouldn't they fire you for not wearing your suit if it's in your contract? Even if you claim it was to protect your life, they'd find another reason that you couldn't really fight against, so. Especially, you know, when a serial killer is the CEO. And its 6 implications. Now, while the term Springlock is used in real life, it's totally different from the actual Fnaf mechanism. I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from Springlocks and You, How Not to Die Remastered. It's a thread on the Fnaf wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs, okay? From my research, what I gathered is that a Springlock in real life is, in simplest terms, a spring lock. It's like if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks or just ends up bringing you back or quotes this page, so it's kind of circular logic, okay? You can't use evidence within the thing that you're trying to prove as proof that it is real. It's like plugging a power bar into itself. It doesn't work. You can't use the same article to prove that Springlocks are real, okay? Because they're not. At least their game form isn't. But if the Springlock failure was real, I think the implications of, like, all of this being real in general is like one of the worst things. You get it? Like, it's definitely in the top 10. Get it? It's a little meta content joke for you because this is a top 10 list. It's in the top 10. Halfway through into number 5, comments. I've mentioned this in previous videos, mostly to explain why there won't ever be an actual real Fnaf restaurant that you'll be able to walk into, and it still remains true since we're only getting a virtual diner that you can only order online. However, I think that one of the worst things still, and especially when it comes to these suits, is the goddamn comments about them. You wanna know a comment that I saw yesterday? Well, yesterday for me as I was writing this, Wednesday for you. Okay, I saw someone say that they want to be springlocked. What? Why? Why would you want to be springlocked? Do you know how messed up that is? You're saying that you want to be killed by this thing? Because there's some hotlines that you should call. Like, why on sweet heaven's earth would you want to be springlocked? Do you know how absolutely agonizingly painful that would be? That would be one of the worst things imaginable, okay? Holy sweet Lord baby Jesus W. Christ. That would be one of the worst ways to go, if not the worst way. At least, like, as far as, like, actually could happen goes, I think, at least, okay? Because, like, a volcano would suck, but it's a bit unrealistic. It's a bad idea, okay? Stop doing this. Stop saying this. Okay, talk to a doctor. And for Afton, I talked about how the implications would apply to, like, how everything in Fnaf would have happened in real life if one of these was real, but one of the worst implications would be that Afton was real. This man has caused me enough pain and suffering already. I don't need him to be like an actual person, especially considering how Springtrap would be set loose next year. and then everything after it would happen. This channel would probably be a true crime channel and not a gaming channel. I'd probably have tried proving it myself and maybe even become a PI so that I can do so. But straight up, this man has already caused me enough grief and suffering and loss and tears of pain at night in my life, and it's made me lose enough of it already to him. So yeah, him being real would just be the worst thing that I can imagine for me. However, that's only if the Springlock failure thing was also real. There are worse things for people in the Fnaf universe though, not in real life, such as in at 3, paperwork. One of the worst things for the survivors after a Springlock failure has to be the paperwork that is associated with it, because goddamn, someone dying in your building is one thing. Someone dying in your building because of something in your building is another, and then add on to that the fact that they were your employee and probably forced into that suit without, like, because of their contract, and you'll be filing reports until you have to retire. Okay, especially because one mistake on those papers means like even more paperwork, and I don't really know anyone who likes to do paperwork. Personally, I hate it, but that's also because my ADHD makes me like, it makes it unbearable for me, honestly. Like, it's even tough to write scripts sometimes, but I mean, eventually I have to, but like that's where my brain thrives, you know, in that stressful environment, which is not good for my health. But if it was that kind of paperwork, I would honestly just quit, because there was no way in hell that I would even want to attempt to keep my focus on that when I can just scroll through TikTok or YouTube instead. So yeah, no thanks. But ultimately, in at number 2, replaced. Oh yeah, don't forget your bones being replaced with metal ones. Yeah, like sure, there's surgery for people who need repairs or replacements, okay? I think like hip replacements are probably the most common actually. However, those have whole processes behind them to ensure a fast recovery and, you know, survival, not being infected. All of a sudden being shoved full of metal bones where normal ones used to be, that's a guaranteed infection at the very least, especially considering how, you know, your normal bones have to go somewhere else. And whether they're just crushed and then spread out inside you or just pushed out the other side, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Plus, you know, probably not alive, which I guess is a good thing, since you won't really have to deal with the intense pain for too long, hopefully. But this actually makes me think, if you replace all of your bones with metal ones, are you still you? Is this like a Ship of Theseus moment? Am I about to have like a WandaVision finale? Or like, are we just our brain? And if we are our brain, does that mean that if we have a brain transplant, do we become another person despite it still being my body? And does that mean that we're just like a brain piloting a bone mech with meat armor? Oh no, existential crisis. And finally, in at number 1, death. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? But the worst thing about a Springlock failure has to be the whole death part, right? Ignore my mumbling. I mean, honestly, okay, it's obviously not for some of you, given the whole comments thing earlier, but the only reason you wouldn't die in a Springlock suit is because you're a main character and need to be around for the story. And then you're just in agonizing pain for the rest of your life. Yeah, the only people who have survived a Springlock failure, well, confirmed, is William. So, yeah, and you know, he's like the main antagonist of the game and was only able to survive since the spirit of a victim was keeping him alive. And in the books, William also ended up getting springlocked before, but then got out of the suit, since Dave Miller, who is revealed to be William, has scars from a previous Springlock failure from before he becomes Springtrap in the books. So the only one who can ever really survive seems to be William, and he's survived it twice. Anyone else is boned, and personally, I'd rather not die by having millions of small metal bits and several dozen large ones shoved into my body, trying to replace my body. I would rather die peacefully in my sleep with Chica's hand around my throat.
In 10, nothing to lose. The Shadow Fears Me is one of Nightmare's ultimate custom night death lines. However, Nightmare is a representation of William's wickedness, and since William is the purple guy who is meant to represent a shadow, and Nightmare represents death, that would mean that William fears death, which makes sense, especially when 2 of his kids were killed by things he made. But what happens after he no longer feels that sense of horror once he's accepted death? I mean, we see it happen in The Man in Room 1280, where he asks to be taken to a Fazbear warehouse so that he can die. So why is that meaningful? Because once you accept death as an inevitability, you have nothing to lose. And the scariest thing isn't animatronic murder or being eaten alive by nightmare versions of characters that used to be your friends. It's a man with nothing to lose, because no matter what, you can't get any lower. It's honestly one of the scariest things in life. And once William no longer feared death, he was able to ascend in a sense, transferring his consciousness into a hard drive and becoming basically immortal. So yeah, that's pretty damn terrifying. And at 9, a gift to relish. What a gift to relish, a victim that can't perish, is one of Nightmare Freddy's voice lines in Ultimate Custom Night. However, we originally used this as a way to prove that William was in hell, but now, with the release of The Man in Room 1280 from Fazbear Fright's book In the Flesh, we know that William was only in a coma while this game was taking place, making this a subtle reference to how William always comes back, the soul of one of his victims that was keeping him alive in order for him to suffer, and now they could do that even more with him in a coma. Does this make the one who possessed him the one that you should not have killed? And if that is the case, and the one you should not have killed isn't Cassidy, who is it? And if Cassidy was the one that was keeping William alive, instead of 2 spirits possessing Golden Freddy, could it be 1 spirit possessing 2 things? A person and the suit. We know that the one you should not have killed is special and incredibly angry, so their agony would be extremely powerful, probably the most powerful. Could this be what Scott was hinting at this whole time? Probably not, if I'm being honest. And at 8, speeches. Telling a story comes with its own pressures and expectations. Mr. Hippo here is right, it does. We expect everything to lead somewhere, every tiny detail to mean something, and if it doesn't, we feel kinda robbed, I guess. But we're going to nitpick the hell out of these speeches, so I guess we haven't learned our lesson, have we? Why are these speeches about telling stories? Mr. Hippo, in my opinion, is Scott's stand-in in game. He uses Mr. Hippo to speak to us, and more or less matpat, about trying to find every little detail in the series to find out the whole story. And honestly, we already knew that. But he keeps saying that not everything has meaning, and that there's no bigger story. What if that's true? What if there is no bigger story here, and we're just connecting things that don't actually connect? Each game could be its own universe for all we know, and Scott could just be telling us outright through these speeches. He also says something that I've been saying for a while, that we shouldn't believe every theory we hear, or treat them as fact and start assuming, because we may assume the wrong thing. Which is what I've been saying whenever someone says that one of my theories isn't right, because another theory has proved me wrong. Like, they're both just theories. Game theories. And we should just enjoy the series. And that's what Mr. Hippo is trying to say too. Maybe Mr. Hippo is supposed to be me. And at 7, corruption. The Ultimate Custom Night voice lines are very useful for these lists. And while going over all of them, I noticed a distinct difference between pre- and post-Fnaf 6 animatronics. Particularly from Baby and the Puppet, since those are the only ones that were in both. Since the normal versions of both Baby and the Puppet say things like, "Seeing you powerless is like music to me," and "I guess you forgot about me." But as soon as we get to the Fnaf 6 scrapped and trapped versions, we get things that are much darker, with lines like, "Time for your controlled shock," and "Let's see how many pieces I can cut you into from Scrap Baby," and "I've been looking for you, and now I will never let you go," along with "It will all be over soon" from Lefty, which is Charlotte's voice, but softer, calmer, and whispering, which makes it hella creepy. Considering how even though these kids are dead, they're still relatively positive about William's undoing, so much so that they can stay relatively positive and upbeat. But once he's escaped so many times, they finally break and start losing their optimism, resulting in darker views and more aggressive death lines, which is honestly one of the darker things in the series to me. These kids get corrupted even after being optimistic after their death, which is horrifying to see. And once you notice, you can't unsee it. That's really sad. And at 6, Markiplier could be canon. Did everyone else forget that Markiplier was in the launch trailer for Special Delivery, or was it just me? Because while reading up on the game looking for clues, it was listed right there in the trivia section. However, apparently it's unknown to even Markiplier himself if his inclusion in the trailer makes him canon. However, this would make him canon in my mind. Since Scott has made matpat canon, I'm sure Markiplier's inclusion makes him canon as well. So yeah, we're all out here thinking that matpat's canonicity could mean plenty of things for the series, but Markiplier is canon too. But that begs the question, who is he? Obviously he isn't the YouTuber Markiplier since he's working for the Fazbear Entertainment Company, but he has to be someone, right? Well, this may be a wild theory, but hear me out. What if he's William Afton? The guy is wearing a suit with a red cracked tie and is frequently placed in front of blue and purple backgrounds. Not only that, but he is also the last person we see before we see the first animatronic in the trailer, Springtrap. I know that at this point in the timeline, William Afton would be dead and possessing Vanny, but what if he recorded all of this beforehand? What if he had planned for all of this before the spring locking? It's doubtful, but a possibility. This could also be Markiplier playing Michael Afton, who could have been asked to film this while working at one of the previous locations since he looked so much like his father. But remember, before being cut off by a glitch, Markiplier says, "We're always watching out for you." And the first line William says in the trailer, "I'm watching you." Halfway through number 5, Special Delivery Game. We know that Scott's in-universe stand-in created games based on the events in the Fazbear restaurants, but we don't know what those games are. Some think the 8-bit mini-games, others think the Fnaf 6 mini-games. I think it could be Security Breach, but what about Special Delivery? Well, we learn in Fazbear Frights the Man in Room 1280 that everyone knows what William did, and they hate him for it, so much so that they actually try to smother him while he's in a coma in the hospital. So why would they sell a Springtrap mini pack for 2.5 thousand Faz coins in Special Delivery? Isn't that just sensationalizing the guy that killed all those kids? Cause like, this pack gives the player a Springtrap plush suit for Endo, 3 Springtrap lures, and nobody seems to bat an eye. They even include other versions of Springtrap, like the poison one, who's purple for God's sake. So why on earth would that happen? Why would Fazbear Entertainment let that happen, especially if they were trying to rebuild their rep? If these are meant to be real animatronics going to people's houses, that's a horrible idea. However, they aren't. It's simply a game that was made by Scott Cawthon in-universe, meant to sensationalize and earn money off multiple tragedies. That's pretty messed up if you ask me. Also, I know it's not Scott, it's just he used his picture, but like, he has no name yet, so I'm calling him Scott, okay? And at 4, who is Vanny? We know that the main antagonist of the next game, Security Breach, will be Vanny, the reluctant follower of William Afton, whose normal version is most likely Vanessa, the security guard from promotional material. However, how did Vanny get possessed? Was she originally Tape Girl? Because if she was, why are the pieces of Glitch Trap still separated in Fnaf VR? In Help Wanted, we need to collect all 16 tapes in order for Glitch Trap to attack us, so we can potentially beat the game by losing to him. So if Tape Girl had already done that, or tried to at least, why are those tapes still separate? Wouldn't they still be together in the tape room? It's not like William would have made her split them up again, or even let her do that if she tried. So who does that leave? Us. We're the ones who collect the tapes, we're the ones who lose to Glitch Trap, and no matter what you identify as, you aren't yourself in that game. You're whoever is testing the game. It's not going to be you yourself. It's going to be the protagonist that Scott intended. And who is that? Vanny. We are Vanessa. We get possessed, and now we need to help ourselves break free of William's control in the next game. Things are about to get messy, and I'm saying that about Fnaf. So you know that this is going to be a show. It's already messy now. Oh, just you wait. And at 3, Lefty. Lefty, as we know, is an acronym for an animatronic meant to lure, encapsulate, fuse, transport, and extract the puppet and bring it to the Fnaf 6 location. However, thanks to Ultimate Custom Night, we now know that there is room for more than just the puppet inside of Lefty, since when killed by Lefty, you can hear it say things like, "Shh, there is room for one more," and "Come spend eternity inside with me," along with "I'm so glad I found you, now let me make some room for you," which heavily indicates that maybe Lefty was also meant to capture William if he didn't make his way back on his own, since the order of salvaging is Molten Freddy, Scrap Trap, Scrap Baby, and then Lefty. So Henry could have just sent Lefty a command to come back once he got word that William had been salvaged, since Michael would have had to let him know as instructed in paragraph 4 of his contract. So Lefty could have been made to get both the puppet, also known as Charlotte, and William, forcing William to confront one of his first victims, and the one that started his undoing. Another one that he should not have killed, dare I say. Another one, not the actual one, chill out. Then ultimately in at number 2, Canon. Nightmare On was added in FNAF 4's Halloween DLC, along with Night Mangle and Nightmare Balloon Boy. Night Mangle's my version of Nightmare Mangle. However, Scott only deemed Nightmare Balloon Boy canon. The other 2 were labeled as non-canon. But if that's truly the case, why does Nightmare On show up in Ultimate Custom Night? Same thing with Nightmare Mangle. Why are these characters included in Ultimate Custom Night if they weren't meant to actually have these characters in universe? This doesn't really make sense to me, since this was a big help with matpat determining the timeline, since we knew that in FNAF 4 Crying Child didn't know who the puppet or Mangle was yet, and because, you know, FNAF 2 location. But now they're fully canon? Or was it just that he saw them but didn't know why? And from that, this opens up so many doors and questions. Was it really Crying Child's mind that caused these hallucinations, or did William design them? If he did, why did he add stomach mouths? And why include animatronics your kid hasn't even seen yet, or may not even exist yet? Why is this a thing? Okay, how can this work with the way that we currently understand the timeline? We don't even understand the timeline. Are these characters canon, or when they were added, was it a glimpse into the future? Is this the start of the multiverse? I can't do this anymore. Finally, in at number 1, game theory is canon. A huge shout out to the user SockGems in the comments of the last part of this list for this little Easter egg. While I talked about matpat being canon in the series last time, SockGems pointed out that he already was thanks to Fetch, the first book in the series. Since a classmate says the signature line of "that's just a theory," and the book says that he said it just like his favorite YouTuber. That means that even before In the Flesh, the YouTube channel of Game Theory was canon, and that means he's making theories about video games. And since we know that there are video games about what took place at Fazbear restaurants in the FNAF universe, does that mean that matpat in that universe is making theories about the in-universe FNAF games, like how he makes theories about the FNAF universe in the real world? Because that's a mind that I was not expecting. And since I've only read the book In the Flesh, I did not know about this. So thank you, SockGems. And I love the name, by the way.
And at 10, working at Freddy's. Working at Freddy's would suck. Like, if we're in so much danger, why are we staying for the 5 nights? Okay, do we need a job that bad? Putting, like, the lore reasons aside, right? But the real question is, other than that, how is Fazbear Entertainment even allowed to have employees in an environment like this? Already working there, you would have to deal with the possibility of a Springlock failure, and Henry and William just letting the people who run your business and making them money wear the suits is stupid, okay? Like, put this on or you're fired, but don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing your internal organs in the hot suits that fail with moisture. Like, seriously? Want to talk about health and safety? What about having actual corpses stuffed into animatronic suits that are in front of how many kids every single day? Especially when one of them is known for loving pizza and in the VR game is shown in her FNAF 1 form to actually be shoving pizza into the various joints of her body. Plus, 5 nights of animatronics trying to kill me? Yeah, no thanks, okay? I'm glad you fired me at the end of it, but honestly, I'd have quit as soon as, like, the first phone call ended. No thanks. Phone guy's like, oh, they might move? No, I'm done. In at 9, Scooped. Now, I know you may be mad and think that this is a stupid point, but hear me out, okay? The Scooper may seem like a weird but normal thing, at least by FNAF standards at first, but with the blueprint revealing how this thing actually works, it's an incredible piece of technology that is far worse than a Springlock suit. It can inject whatever it ends up scooping with Remnant, which is a molten metal possessed by souls, and assuming that my theory about Michael being a robot was wrong, keeping a person alive after removing their insides. It's capable of doing that, replacing their parts with robot parts, and then having those robotic parts leave the body but still have the person be alive. In essence, it makes that person just a walking case of flesh that is still somehow able to stand up on its own. Unless it didn't actually remove anything and it just like opened him up, but then again, it would still require some serious juice to keep him alive after that. That's pretty damn impressive, and it's also terrifying. I'd rather have the instant death of a Springlock suit than having my bones replaced with robotic ones. Yeah, no thanks. At least while I'm awake. Replace my bones with metal ones when I'm asleep, so I can just like... In at 8, Grabbed. Elizabeth Afton getting grabbed by Baby is one of the most terrifying moments in the series. Possibly because Crying Child saw it, which would explain the stomach mouths on the nightmare animatronics. However, if we were to like see this from Crying Child's perspective, whether that detail is canon or not, if we saw it from his perspective, oh my freaking god, that would be so utterly terrifying. I would stand still. I wouldn't know what to do. Okay, how do you explain why a kid is like hiding in the bushes while his sister is getting grabbed by an animatronic claw? Okay, you don't. She was just trying to get ice cream. It's horrible. It's shocking. God, especially considering that Elizabeth ends up turning into an absolute psychopath after this, okay? Like, Elizabeth is nuts. But still, like, I don't know.
that thought of just watching someone get grabbed, like sure, maybe for Elizabeth it wasn't that bad because, you know, she kind of was crazy apparently, but still, like watching it happen, that's just f***ed up. That's a horrible thing to watch happen. It's worse than a Springlock, definitely. In at 7, WWWAD. Ah, yes. What would William Afton do? Because honestly, being him would suck worse than a Springlock failure. I mean, like, I rip on Elizabeth all the time for wanting to impress her father in Fnaf 6 like I was just doing, but I'm right to, okay? This man is an absolute psycho and not even a smart one. I have made so many videos about how dumb William is. Like, what if William Afton was smart? Top 10 William Afton dumbest moments. William Afton's luckiest moments. And that last one was just me ripping on him again because somehow, despite being this stupid and insane, he managed to not get caught. Every single time I talk about how stupid he is, I talk about how he could have done it better, which is why in various videos I will say hi to the jury, because I know for a fact that if anything ever happens in this area, they're coming to me first because I know how to be a psycho. But still, come on, that's it. That's the number, okay? Being Springlocked would suck, but William Afton sucks harder. Wait, no, that sounds like, no, wait, no, don't cut me off. I didn't mean it's 6 doors. You knew that this was going to be on the list, okay? If you've been on this channel at all, you know that I hate the goddamn mother-loving doors in this game. Why do they open when the power is out? That doesn't make sense, okay? If it's an electromagnet, like everyone keeps saying in the comments whenever I bring this up, those require power to turn on. So if anything, it would be costing them power to keep the doors open rather than keep them closed. Gravity does not work in reverse. If the magnet is off when the door is up, it would just fall down. I get that it's supposed to be for gameplay purposes, okay, but what in-universe thing makes this make sense? People say that it's like a safety issue, so like if there's a fire or whatever, you can leave, but that's what windows are for. I am almost positive that there should be a window in that room, and if there's not, that's yet another OSHA violation that they need to address, okay? There's no conceivable way in any reality that the doors should work that way, but they do, and it makes me mad. Like, why would you do this, okay, Scott? Why? Sky Daddy Scott, I'm bringing it back. Why? Some people, like I said, it's a fire safety thing, but like, no, if the building runs out of power, how could the doors open? Electromagnets use power to be on. So like, even if it is a fire thing, how are they keeping them up? I don't get it. Also, if you made it through this far, subscribe. You clearly enjoy the video, or just me going insane. And there's plenty more of that on this channel, no matter which one you liked, so you're welcome. How about doing number 5, being a cop? Being a cop in the Fnaf universe must be a horrible idea, because not only are you now a cop, but you're also a cop in the Fnaf universe, which for the sake of this list is working at the precinct that failed to capture William Afton, okay? So now the public ridicules you, they don't think you can actually do your job, and you probably got your budget cut so badly that you're maybe able to get 1 squad car, but that's it. 1 squad car for the whole station. Plus, now you gotta deal with multiple arson cases, and the fact that Freddy's keeps coming back and more kids keep going missing. I don't know. There's a weird purple guy walking around that smells bad, but it's like also like a skin condition, so you can't really say anything about it without absolutely destroying the slightest bit of reputation that you have left as an officer in this universe. Like, that's in essence what it's like to be a cop in FNAF. Okay, or what it would realistically be like. Because honestly, these dudes didn't check inside the bleeding, death-smelling animatronics when kids went missing in that building. So, I get it. They're either ridiculed by the public, or you just lose the majority of your IQ once you join up with them. Those are the only 2 explanations. It could be both as well. In at 4, MCI. The missing children's incident is definitely worse than a Springlock failure. I mean, the one failure that we know about that happened in the games only affected 1 person, and a horrible person at that. So I mean, just by sheer numbers alone, the missing children's incident is definitely worse. But not even just that, okay? Those parents must have been in a rough spot. Not only did they lose their kids, but they also have to deal with the incompetence of the in-universe police and the whole plot requirement of Afton getting away with it to actually continue the series. So yeah, like I said, there were literally animatronics leaking mucus and blood that people were comparing to human corpses
corpses and they weren't actually investigated. So, do you know how insanely infuriating that would be? Okay, I'm surprised that Henry was the one to put Afton down and not someone else. Like, yeah, he got springlocked in 93, but that was 7 years after the missing children's incident. Had I been one of those parents, I would not have cared about the prison sentence, okay? And I don't think that anyone would have really judged me for it. I think that they would have thanked me and posted my bail. I mean, I would have lost the trial, but still. Hi, jury. And at 3, Henry Emily. I get that Springlock failures suck, but even the good guys in this series are kinda trash. FNAF 6 was supposed to be the end of the Afton story. That's what Henry set out to do in that game. Make sure that nobody remembered what happened there despite the parents of the victims remembering and the various other news sources covering it. However, the dumbass figured that the first fire didn't work, so a second one is definitely going to. And the fact that he was so confident in this plan for whatever reason that he actually let himself die in the process to make sure that nobody remembered what happened is dumb. Like I said, dude, even if Henry and William and his kids are dead, the parents of the victims still know. And as we learned in Security Breach, there are other parents who remember too, citing the missing children from the Pizzaplex as happening again, which means they know it happened before. Maybe if Henry had some balls, William wouldn't have been able to possess Vanny and come back yet again to wreak even more havoc, or I don't know, maybe everything would have been fine. The Pizzaplex missing children are a direct result of Henry being worse than a Springlock failure, and you can't tell me any different. Springlock failures have only resulted in one canonical death in the series, or death, but Henry has resulted in a lot more. But ultimately, in number 2, being an Afton. Okay, look, Springlock failures are horrible. Okay, yes, and yes, William is a horrible person, but being just an Afton in this universe must be the worst thing ever. It's like the worst spawn point in existence, because every Afton has been subjected to a horrible fate. It's like if Sean Bean is cast to play a character, you know that they're going to die. It's that, but if you're an Afton, you're going to suffer a horrible fate. Okay, let's go through the list, shall we? Here we go. William, springlocked, possessed, forced to suffer for like 60 years at least. Charlotte, grabbed by Baby, going on to possess the animatronic, then joins a group of other animatronics that crawl inside of her big brother to escape an underground facility, and then gets kicked out of the greater collective, and then goes on to try to impress her father that caused her death in the first place by creating the robot that killed her. Talk about daddy issues. Then we have Crying Child, who we don't even know this kid's name. He watched his sister get crushed, he got crushed by a robot, and then he goes on to possess his brother and makes him suffer before realizing that it's not his fault. Then, speaking of the brother Michael, he blamed himself for killing his brother. He then spent his whole life trying to undo his father's horrible acts, and he himself was scooped in stuff full of robot parts, including his sister, which is again a whole other issue. He was made into a purple bruised man that everyone was scared of, and he was finally burnt to death in FNAF 6 by Henry without even being given the option to survive. So yeah, being an Afton is cursed. And that's not even talking about how Gregory or Vanessa could be Aftons. And finally, in at number 1, the lore! Oh, the worst thing about FNAF is the lore. Yeah, having to try to figure it out or even think about it or try to give it any coherent links is probably the most horrific thing that you can try to attempt in regards to the series, yes, but also literally at all. Do not try this, please. I get messages on Instagram saying like, oh, I have a FNAF theory and I was hoping we could talk about it. Like, I appreciate that you want to talk to me about it as opposed to like matpat or someone famous, maybe because I'm more likely to reply because I'm not famous. But like, the best advice that I can give to you is if you value any shred of your sanity, do not try this. Do not attempt to put any shred of logic into FNAF. It will break you. Okay, do you think that I wanted to do this? Do you think that I planned on doing this for 2 years? No! I read one comment that said I see a FNAF in the thumbnail and I click, and it drove me so far into the madness that I'm basically the Joker of the FNAF community. People don't like me because I made a joke video about the worst FNAF fan games that included games that people loved, and now it's on the goddamn YouTuber wiki as a controversy. People get mad at you for misgendering fictional robots. They're robots and not real. People were furious with the Pop Goes creator because of that, and I'm like, what? Dude, just don't do it, okay? I'm not gatekeeping. I'm genuinely trying to help you. I want you to be okay, so please save yourself from the toxicity and let my heart and soul be the one to suffer all of this torture. And at 10, it's a suit. While the Springtrap suit contains William's body, it is still a suit. The Golden Bonnie animatronic was a Springlock suit, which as Phone Guide tells us is a specially designed suit that doubles as both animatronic and suit. Meaning that the Springlock mechanics in the Golden Bonnie suit would retract like some form of even more complex Iron Man and create enough room for a person to climb inside and wear like your normal Chuck E. Cheese suit. Obviously, they weren't amazingly designed since there were some flaws. Like when they get wet, the spring locks can close easily, which is why Michael got bit in Fnaf 4 and why William got snapped while in the suit. The suit also is clearly meant to be a suit since it has 5 fingers and 5 toes, which the other suits are lacking in favor of 4 fingers and 3 toes. It's even more clear when looking at the secret menu screens for Fnaf 3, where on rare occasions you can see a skinless William Afton trying to get out of the suit by prying the head open. Yeah, it's weird. And at 9, William Afton. I've said it before and I'll say it until the day this stops being an issue. Springtrap contains the body of William Afton inside. We see Purple Guy run into the Golden Spring Bonnie suit at the end of Five Nights 3, where due to the moisture in the air and William's rush, he ended up getting trapped inside thanks to the spring locks, and then he ends up collapsing, but take note, we never really see him die. He's just twitching, as he was in the trailer to that game, and while yes, Michael may be literally purple now, as his flesh decayed after Ennard entered him in Sister Location, just because he's literally purple doesn't mean he's the killer. And just because when Michael says, "I'm going to come find you" at the end of Sister Location, and then Springtrap appears, that does not mean that Springtrap is him. We see that Michael was at Sister Location, and this camera movement takes place at Fazbear Fright. That was burnt down by Henry in an attempt to kill William because we all know who did it. William is inside Springtrap, not Michael. Scott even confirmed this when talking about matpat's timeline after Ultimate Custom Night came out, saying if you're hung up on the whole Will Trap versus Mike Trap debate, watch matpat's video. And in that video, matpat says that it is indeed William in the suit, not Michael. There you go, please, stop. And at 8, secret room. All Freddy Fazbear locations had a secret room, a room that was secret because it was invisible to the animatronics, meaning that while every other room was programmed into their pathfinding, this room wasn't, and because it was never mentioned to any customer, only employees that were around before they sealed them up. Why did they seal up these rooms? Because William Afton was stuck inside one, and if they just closed the one, that would look kinda suspicious. He was twitching in the Spring Bonnie suit. This is seen in the Fnaf 3 final minigame where we see William run into the suit and then collapse. This is the safe room as indicated by the fact that the Shadow Freddy can find it, but you as an animatronic are physically unable to enter because your pathfinding doesn't allow it. William uses this to hide inside and then dismantle you as you try to find him, but he ends up unintentionally releasing the spirits of the children he killed. After he gets snapped in the suit, they fade away, but are only really put to rest when you get the good ending and give Golden Freddy the party she wanted, even if it's not enough for her to let go, which is kinda salty. I mean, like, it must have been a really bad cake. Come on, puppet. Chop chop. And at 7, no head.
So no head?
The suit doesn't have an endoskeleton head, get your mind out of the gutter. It's actually impossible for it too, since even with the crazy advanced tech that these places have, you cannot move an endoskeleton head as they are presented in the games away enough for a normal head that just barely fits inside to fit inside. This is also shown in the menu screens when William is trying to remove the Springtrap head. There is no form of robotic head present. It's his eyes and his meat. How on earth would the face operate in the Springlock suit if there was no proper head? Is it just a different form of robot or like a different arrangement of parts to get everything working more efficiently? Because if that's the case, why isn't that the case with every animatronic? If it costs the company less to manufacture, I'm sure William would be fine with it if not encourage it, since he gets his daily fill of child murder and he saves a little bit of money on the side, so might as well. Well, maybe it's more expensive, but if that's the case, I'm sure it's easier to just make a separate suit than paying extra for a specially designed suit that doubles as both animatronic and suits. Like, just make a separate one. You can still kill kids in it. And at 6, no clear motive. We know that William Afton is the purple guy and that he is the spring chap and that he is the killer, but what we don't know for sure is why. We know his boy gets chomped and then he sets out to put him back together as a robot, but he was killing kids before that even happened. What we don't know is why he's doing it. We know he sets out to create more Remnant in an effort to unlock the secrets to eternal life or something like that after he discovers Remnant, but why did he start killing kids in the first place? Did one act like Braith and just really piss him off? Was it just something he wanted to try? Is it some weird fetish? He clearly feels emotion since he felt sad after losing his son, sad enough to block out the woman Ballora represents from his life, but we don't know 100% why he killed Susie in the first place. Do Do you have any theories? Do you have any idea why he could have done it? Let me know in the comments, because figuring this one out may be the key to solving the rest of the lore that we haven't really figured out already. And at 5, lie lures. He had to lure kids into the back room somehow, right? So dressed in the Spring Bonnie suit, he told kids all sorts of things to get them backstage. We know he told Susie, the girl who would later possess Chica, that he had her dog that was actually still alive, as indicated by the bleeding dog carcass in the Fruity Maze minigame and the whole Chica the high school year scene where she says, "I told them someone ran over his dog," or something like that.
He'll be mine by the end of the day. I just know it. I told him that someone ran over his dog in front of my house.
So we know he lies to bring kids backstage, where he ends up killing them for, at this point, unknown reasons. Stuffs the bodies into the animatronics to hide them and then leaves like nothing happened. It's like that meme where Pennywise is talking to Georgie and he's like, "I have brand new Pokemon cards down here," and then Georgie crawls in. Like, you know the one? For me it would be something like, "I have information about Stephen Amell returning as the Green Arrow down here." Or like I once made one that said, "I have all the other Pokemon you can't get in Sword and Shield down here." And that one would honestly get me. Pokemon is the one game that shouldn't need a DLC, okay? Forgot this was a Fnaf list. And for Scrap Trap. Scrap Trap is the same as Springtrap. Pink guy is purple guy, is Springtrap, is Scrap Trap, is William Afton. There's an entirely separate debate online that is along the lines of William is Springtrap but Michael is Scrap Trap, or something like that, and it's just ridiculous. Why would that be true? The only Spring Bonnie suit we know of is the one that William was inside before the events of Pizzeria Simulator. For those of you who don't know, Scrap Trap is the version of Springtrap you find outside of the pizzeria in the back alley, like where you find Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, and Lefty. And in accordance to paragraph 4, you bring it inside so that when the pizzeria burns at the end of the week, everyone who needed to be set free with fire, since that's the only way to destroy remnants, can be set free. Scrap Trap is just a further decayed version of Springtrap. It's not a separate character, it's not its own thing, it's not Michael or anyone new. It's Springtrap, it's William, they are all one and the same. And 3, Ultimate Custom Night. We can all agree at this point that Ultimate Custom Night takes place in hell, and we play as William Afton dealing with the torture we deserved for killing all those kids, but specifically the one we should not have killed. However, the confusing thing to me is that in Ultimate Custom Night, while we play as William Afton, we can also play against animatronics like Springtrap and Scrap Trap, which are indeed versions of us. This is confusing to me, but it makes me wonder, not about Willie being Springtrap, but about what the mechanics of this are. I suppose it could be that he did indeed create that monster, since he hid in the suit to feel more powerful when confronting the spirits, or perhaps it's because it was made of remnant. Or it could have just been that the characters available are the ones that Afton deemed his greatest failures in his mind. It's even more confusing that in the game code, Scrap Trap is referred to as William Afton. Scott. I know you're clarifying that Scrap Trap is William, but that throws a whole lot more wrenches into this than there should be for a final game in the original story. Come on. And 2, names. Springtrap has gone by many names, some being before the name was known, like when the Five Nights 3 trailer came out, some being just simple mistakes. However, they all existed, and technically you could also say that Springtrap went by all the names that Purple Guy did, since they're the same person, but I'm going to ignore that. Springtrap has also been known as, well, Springtrap, William Afton, Michael Afton, Scrap Trap, Spring Bonnie, Golden Bonnie, and most interestingly, Hybrid. This name was brought on when the trailer for Five Nights 3 was released, and technically it was right. The fans assumed that Hybrid was in fact a hybrid of all the toy animatronics which he used to build himself, which could have been the inspiration for creation from The Joy of Creation. But in fact, Springtrap is just a hybrid of human and animatronic suit, not being entirely one or the other, hence why I refused to put him in the scariest animatronics list, especially since I don't really find him that scary. But Amanda put him on when she took apart, but despite that, I still stand by my viewing. I stand by my reasoning, okay? He's not entirely an animatronic. He's still in the suit. We never see him die. Finally, in at number 1, oldie but a goodie. This suit is one hell of an old suit, not to mention how long William was stuck inside it, but this suit dates back all the way to Fredbear's Family Diner, which is crazy, and even if they had this technology when that diner was prominent, that makes me even more concerned about how this thing was Iron Man levels of advanced. And while the decay on Springtrap makes that evident, it confuses me as to how it started to break down when Golden Freddy, a Springlock that is as old if not older than Spring Bonnie, seems fine in the first game. I think it's because those holes and rips were in fact made by William when he was trying to escape the suit. We see him trying to pry off the head, so it would make sense why he would have torn off bits of fur or even removed the whole foot in an effort to be set free. What do you guys think about the Springtrap decay? Let me know your thoughts down below.